Welcome to Charting Change in Legal. I am Ari Kaplan, an analyst who covers the legal industry, and I am here, honored to be here with my co-host.
Caroline Hill, Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here.
Caroline. It's wonderful to speak with you, and this is, I think, episode 31.
It's amazing,
I
Ari.
know, it's really quite extraordinary. We've somehow found a way to, you know, fill 30 hours of it's episode 32. Now that I've checked, it's episode 32. Amazing, even more amazing. That's 31 hours of discussion. And I'm excited to see you. I would love to start our conversation by first congratulating you on producing your second SAGAP conference. And I was hoping you would just share a little bit about some takeaways and just the experience in general.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So yes, this was the second year of our the SAGAP conference, which focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the legal sector. So it started out last year where we taught women. It focused just on women speaking, teaching them to coaching them to speak in public, with my excellent coach Sarah Lloyd Hughes from Ginger Leadership Communications, who teaches women how to give TED Talks, and she works with executive teams, and she's just brilliant. And so it started out like that. And then what last year we had people speaking very passionately and very candidly about their own journeys, and their own troubles. And it was very clear that the women from ethnically diverse backgrounds had way more challenges. And so we thought, you know what, we've got an opportunity to talk specifically about some of those issues and also some of the really bad statistics in the legal sector, in terms of non-white lawyers, non-white legal tech people. So we turned it into 2 days. The first focused on broad DE&I issues, challenges, opportunities, and the second day continued to be teaching women to speak in public. I have to say, it always is incredibly emotional and quite draining. But it was amazing. I had on day one, I had a panel of people who included Sharon Thomas, who heads the Black Council Forum, and I interviewed Trevor Sterling, who was the first senior partner of the first Black senior partner of a UK top 100 law firm, which is Moore Barlow. And he talked really inspiringly. He was part of the Windrush generation. His parents came over from Jamaica. And he talked about his pathway into law, which was not conventional, and how law firms can start to give people with real talent, opportunities that they may not have if law firms continue just to look at what we call the Russell Group universities, which are like the top 5 universities. And he's clearly absolutely brilliant in his field, in clinical negligence, personal injury. And it was really inspiring. The day two, we taught women how to get up on their feet and present their business idea to be heard above all the noise that's out there. There's so much competition. This goes for men and women, that there's so much competition for our airspace. There's so much noise in the market. So it's like, how do we tell a story? How do we tell a business story and capture people's imagination, or get them to come along with us and to make sure that we're heard? And it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
One of the things that I often find, and I saw some LinkedIn posts about the event, and they were all really positive. And one of the things that always appeals to me, and that always resonates with me, is when people who are leaders in our community and still reveal the fact that they get nervous or uncomfortable or feel insecure. And I say that to people all the time. I've spoken at hundreds of events. I mean that factually, not in an obnoxious way. And I think that I always say to my children, because they're the only ones who are forced to sort of listen to me, that, I get nervous. And, the issue is, how do you channel that energy into something productive? And that, even if you don't see someone up there who seems nervous and they seem completely comfortable and just totally at ease, they're thinking about a lot of different things in that moment. And so I always appreciate that when there's a discussion, particularly of the tactical aspects of speaking in front of others.
It's so interesting. So I don't get nervous of public speaking per se, but I really prepare and I have that kind of I suppose I do, or maybe I just don't admit to myself that I'm nervous, but because like with the panel, I had four really strong people on stage, and I was just chairing, right? I'm not a speaker as such, but I'm chairing. And that was the thing I was most nervous about was trying to manage. Actually, it was so easy in the end, but I was really stressing about, am I going to, when we did our prep call, everybody's thoughts were all over the place. And I was like, oh my word, how am I going to pull this together? And actually, I think the more you do it, this was the thing that I shared with everybody and will share with everybody every time. The more you do it, the easier it gets. You know this, right? Like it doesn't mean that you're not nervous or you don't prepare loads, but you just have this confidence you can be present in the here and now. Whereas when you're really novice or your brain you almost let your brain goes a bit flighty, you're nervous, you don't listen to what people are saying, you've got that kind of nervous energy which is not constructive. One of our speakers on the first day called it the caveman syndrome, and you can't differentiate between whether you're being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger or whether you're having to give a talk on stage, and it has the same impact, which is a huge shot of adrenaline. You can't think, your brain goes blank, your hands go sweaty, and then you can't concentrate. You don't listen to what anybody else is saying. And that's actually what now I don't do because I'm not, much more experienced. And it was great just to be able to be in that moment, listening to what they had to say and just responding to a certain extent spontaneously without feeling uncomfortable or without having to panic about me not being in control.
One of the mindset shifts that was super helpful to me years ago, I don't remember where I saw this or who said it, or I may have read it somewhere, but I feel like a lot of people think when they're up in front of others that they're just immediately judging everything about them. And I was reading something, or I was at a presentation, and the person said, actually, the people in the audience are rooting for you. They have invested their time to come hear whatever you have to say. They want you to succeed. They want to be just blown away. They would love something that they can take away and have learned and tell others. They don't they don't want to judge you. They don't want to waste any energy at all thinking anything other than that was fantastic. And so that has always helped me. I'm like, these people are rooting for me. They're smiling up at me. I'm going to smile back at them. Like I'm going to try to embrace that experience. And so I've always felt really lucky to be in a position where someone's sort of hoping that so I feel a responsibility to give that back to them, if nothing else, just to share some energy.
Yes.
And I think that it's interesting because I have been thinking about this as someone who speaks and someone who presents as you do, about how do I keep that going into next year. Like we're at a point in the year. I always say to people, setting a resolution on December 31st is kind of silly. If you're going to start doing something, start thinking about it and start doing it in November or
Yeah.
December 1st or November 30th, just so that then come the beginning of the year, you're already in the progress is already being made. And so as we're talking about this, I'm always like, what is next year going to look like? Not just professionally and legal and in professional services, but just for ourselves. And I think that people, for our several listeners, I bet you they're going through this as well. Just thinking about what can I do next year? How could I be better? Where will the work come from? Where are there opportunities? And that's, a focus of mine as we kind of enter the last couple of months of the year.
You're so organized. See, like I must admit,
I
I
don't think
I
I'm organized. It's much more like the chaos in my mind. It's like you
you're
better think
so
about this.
good.
So yeah,
You're so good. I've been listening to this guy called Rob Dial of the Mindset Mentor. Have you heard of it?
no.
Yeah, I really recommend it. It's very thought provoking, in terms of being. intentional about everything that we do. I've been trying to be really good. Ari, you are always really good at running and fitness, and I've been really good lately. I've been trying to be healthy, and I have to say I feel really good for it. And that was actually to do with the say gap because I didn't feel in control with so much to do. So I just was like, right, I have to look at myself and just get like it's like Rocky, bam, 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 bam. But Rob Dial on the Mindset Mentor talks about being really intentional and perhaps taking these opportunities to think about what we do. This is great, isn't it? I've got something in my throat. um, you take over for one
Okay.
second.
Yeah, I'll just so I one of the things that has come up, and I want to just share this with folks because it may be helpful to them. I had this experience just yesterday because you've said this before. Oh, you're very good about running or whatever. I'm not as good as I would like to be, but I definitely try. And I have a colleague. She's actually a coach for swimmers and triathletes and has great success. Her name is Allie Headley. And Allie taught me something years ago when I would say, I don't want to get up and run, or I don't feel like going to swimming, which involves taking a bunch of stuff and driving somewhere and then changing. And she shares this mindset with people that she coaches, which is sort of make a deal with yourself, whatever that deal has to be. And the deal is, you know what? I'm not going to go running, but I am going to put on running shorts, special shorts that I use for running, which everyone has, or I'm not going to go for a long swim, but I'm going to go for 5 minutes, or I'm going to just, you know what? I'm going to get in the car. And if I decide in the car that I'm not going to go, but like, of course, once you get in the car, you decide you're going to drive somewhere. Once you put on running shorts, you're like, I just might as well put on running sneakers. And like, it's a very interesting concept. And so, to your point about this mindset mentor, make a deal with yourself to walk around the block where you live or your drive up and down your driveway or whatever that looks like and say, you know what, I'm going to think of one thing that I'm going to do next year. I'm going to improve this, or I'm going to do this again. I'm going to, the Say Gap was so successful for 2 years in a row. We're going to do it a third year, and I'm going to make a call. And like, it's just, I love the concept of make a deal with yourself. She shared it with me in the context of going to swimming or showing up. And I feel like every single time I feel like, I don't feel like doing this. Luckily, I have a wonderful spouse who's very motivating and will say, I'll do it with you. And that's kind of nice. And if you have a friend like that, that's great. But if you don't, I think the idea of making a deal with yourself in a lot of different contexts beyond fitness is really helpful.
Yeah, sorry for checking there, and thank you very much for so seamlessly
Yeah.
taking.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he says exactly that. He's he says about to put the it's not about whether you go to the gym, it's about whether you put your trainers on, right? He said the decision comes at the point when you either put your trainers on or you don't, and he's got all of these kind of tactics in order to help you go through work out where your motivation comes from, where the sort of bad decisions come from. And he says about this guy who was trying to lose weight, who decided to go to the gym every day, every other day, whatever, for 5 minutes. And that was the deal that he made with himself. So he talks very much as well about making a deal with yourself. He would go for 5 minutes, but obviously by the time and 5 minutes is nothing, right? So, but by the time he got there, he was like, oh, well, I've made the effort to get here. So then he obviously did more than 5 minutes until eventually he was doing half an hour, whatever. And actually, so now I always leave my gym kit out the night before. So I'm not looking for it in the morning because I go really early, much like you go swimming at the crack of dawn. I go to the gym at the crack of dawn always before my kids get up, or don't get up because they're teenagers. And that's why I need to be here. But so I leave my gym kit out, right? And then there's no kind of, oh, I can't find it today. And it's all just there. And it makes it so easy.
Well, so when people are thinking into next year, that's a
Yeah.
really good, like what's the one thing, I will often try to come up with a email template based on something, and I'll leave that window open and try to be mindful of like, oh, can I send that to one person and say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this next year. Any interest, or is that a challenge that your team is having? And you know, often people will say, actually, that's not a challenge, but we would be really interested in this other challenge. And I feel like you only get to that point of understanding through a little bit of trial and error, a little bit of failure. So, I host this virtual lunch every month and every day actually. And, I always getting sponsors, and sometimes I'll reach out to a sponsor and I'll be like, oh, are you interested? No, we're not interested, but we'd love to follow up about an upcoming event, or we'd love to. And I think that if people can do anything as we enter into a new year and kind of close out this year, is try to experiment with some outreach and an idea. It may help shape that idea, but it also may lead to something totally different that was unexpected. And I feel like if there's anything I'm pursuing, it's sort of like the benefit of the unexpected that people, don't necessarily can't really anticipate, but will occur if you put something in motion.
What about ex sort of experimenting with Gen AI and that as we approach the new year and becoming familiar, sort of forcing or maybe not forcing if you love it, but like what about using new technologies and making sure that we're actually using them every day?
I so we had a really interesting series of discussions last month on the virtual lunch called it was the series was demystifying AI for legal, and it was with a company called Area. And obviously they're an AI software organization, and we talked about this sort of daily use. And so one of the suggestions that Dan Quintas, who was our on the virtual lunch from Area, often he said, leave a window open on your browser with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your tool is. If your tool is Copilot, use Copilot, but just leave that open. And as you're doing work, think of use cases. So, like, could I use this for that? And so, for example, when I do a podcast, I have a series of questions that I ask the guest. Then I would take the time to come up with a narrative about that and then tags from that. And I did this manually. So then now I use ChatGPT and I'm like, can you just put the narrative I spoke with Caroline Hill, the editor in chief of Legal IT Insider, about the SAGAP we talked about? And then it's pretty amazing how efficient and easy that is. And so I've actually made a commitment every day this month because we're doing another series about the benefits of practical AI with Steno. And we've been having these conversations. And I've made a commitment every single day to talk about practical ways that I am using generative AI. So I think that people need to kind of make a commitment, sort of like a deal. Make a deal with yourself that every day you're going to do something and, surprise yourself.
I don't use ChatGPT to write most of the time, but I'm writing an article about Trump and the impact that the Trump administration will have on tech at slash legal tech. And I thought I'd play around and put a whole bunch of data into ChatGPT to see what it came up with as a sort of the outline of an article. I mean, it's fast. It's so fast. It's amazing. The only thing I'd say is that I'm not sure because I obviously go back and have to change and check and read and change a lot. And I don't know on balance, like whether it would have taken me more time or less time to write it than if I hadn't used ChatGPT. It's a really interesting thing because I'm pretty quick at writing. Um, and I think actually it's quite a painful process because it does things like, I'd put in quotes, only agreed quotes, from people that are on the record, nothing confidential. Um, and there are obviously bits where it has sort of quoted stuff that's not their quote. And, in the same way as a lawyer will have to be careful about it, how it cites case law, whatever it might be. We have to be careful. And the other thing that I haven't quite got my head around is just from a copyright and perspective, just making sure that it's, if I'm taking stuff that comes from ChatGPT, that I'm not breaching anybody else's, because, we would never plagiarize, right? As a matter of absolute principle, you would never copy anything, or if you copied it, you would have to cite it, right? It's a basic fact of journalism. But it's like, are there risks if I just use some of the text that ChatGPT gives me that I might be inadvertently copying somebody else's work? That's of concern to me. But I use it. I'm starting to use it all the time. It is. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's so quick.
Yeah, I'm really trying to. I've made a commitment, as I mentioned, to try to use something about it every day, proactively,
Yeah.
accidentally using a tool that has it built in, but proactively asking it to do something. But I'm, in general, asking it to respond to a defined set of data, like giving it questions and saying, use only these questions to come up with a quick summary, or I'll I moderate as you do a series of webinars. And so I'll say, here's the transcript of the webinar. Pull out all comments by X or pull out all and I will often in the chat highlight comments that people make as a way to kind of develop a set of key takeaways. So if I'm going to then post on LinkedIn about what this webinar was about, so then I'll say, highlight all comments that I made by Ari Kaplan or something. And it does that very, very well. The other day, I actually said I pasted some of my Chrome history and with time slots. And I said, you know what? Can you just tell me how I spent my time? And it was actually really, it was like, oh, you spent 20 minutes on email, you spent 30 minutes. It was sort of embarrassing because there was a lot of like sports articles, and I'll read an article about sports, and then I'll look at the contract for that particular player, and I'll go into Wikipedia to see the history, and I'll get down a rabbit hole and ChatGPT. I feel like it's like wants to give me a little slap on the wrist, like, Ari, this is ridiculous. I think you should avoid the sports website. You have a gift for wasting incredible amounts of time on total nonsense. And so in that case, I don't mind being called out. I appreciate the accountability, but I'll typically not, I'll try not to ask it to create anything. And if I do, I'll usually say, can you create something from what I've provided? Please don't add anything of your own. I don't know how exactly if that, but for my purposes, I've really been trying to find practical ways to use it where I don't want to have that concern. Like someone told me they use it as a search engine, and I thought I'm not doing that. Although someone did reach out to me recently and say, ChatGPT said you're someone that we should include in a panel on this topic, which
Mm.
I was surprised by, excited by. It didn't materialize, but it just was a surprising note to receive that ChatGPT knows who I am. I thought it was.
It is great. I mean, so you can, yeah, obviously you have to be super careful but it is, yeah, it's great for searching for stuff. You know, obviously, depending on what it is, you have to verify, blah blah blah. But if you, it's a very different experience, obviously, to Google, right? Google
No, but if
is
you Yeah,
yeah.
but if you can use it, all I'll say as a suggestion
Mm,
to people in this process of thinking what opportunities are available as we approach a new year.
mm,
I
mhm.
did an experiment and I said, what does Ari Kaplan of Ari Kaplan Advisors do? And it was pretty good, but it indicated some things that I do not do. And then I thought, wow, that's interesting because people actually think I do that, right? Like technology selection consulting, for example. People think I help them pick. I don't do that, but I can totally see why my background and the work that I produce would lead people to believe that. And it was actually really helpful because, I also am trying to figure out how do I better shape what I do and how do I add things to my portfolio in the new year. And I think people asking that question may find opportunities and also areas where there may be some misunderstanding of how they provide value to the community.
It's a very good spot. I've just looked myself. I've just done that, and it just got basically the about section of our website. It's just like nothing exciting on mine.
And it didn't find any mistakes.
No, no, it's all
How
accurate. It's
how
basically the
interesting.
about us section of, it's my profile on my website. So it
Yeah.
hasn't, yeah.
Although I will give a shout out. We may have talked about this, but I've used Notebook LM a couple of times,
Hmm.
uploading a document and asking it to create a discussion about it. And it is shockingly effective and
Yeah.
insightful, almost to a level that I felt personally heard. I was like, I can't believe the insights that this AI program is generating about my research. It really called out interesting points. It made reference to specific nuances that I really tried to highlight. I was really excited by it and impressed. And in fact, every time I've shared it, I've gotten the same response, like, wow, I can't believe it said that.
Yes.
So a lot of ways to we will enter an era of content creation that will really be quite dynamic.
We should for one of our last episodes, we'd have to do some future gazing, right? Like we have to do some predictions for next year. That would be kind of a fun way to wrap up the end of the year.
So I just did a podcast and they pulled a piece of audio and video of me talking something about that. And I was like, it was basically something like everybody wants to make a prediction, but none of us know what's going to happen and none of us really know what's going on. So my goal is to try to speak to as many people and it was just a funny, so that I can at least give the consensus of what people expect as opposed to make a prediction. So it's just really, I was like, I don't know how great that sounded, but it was a very funny, it was just like, that's my philosophy. Like, we really don't know what's actually happening. And I guess, you can throw it up in the air and hope that one of those things turns out to be correct. So, I look forward to that. I think that'll be
All
fun.
right.
And yeah,
We'll both speak. We'll speak to some people, and then I'll speak about my people, and you can speak about your people.
the number of my people is much smaller than the number of your people. So we'll compare. We'll have to pick a limit, like two, and consistent with our listeners. So maybe
I
that's what we'll
love it.
do. Maybe we will
Okay.
call out our listeners and
Oh yeah,
amazing. Our
get them on the
listeners are on
show.
the hook now. So I actually know exactly who the three of them are, and I
Okay.
will I will reach out and we will collectively that would be really funny.
Can we
Maybe we'll
actually
pull
do
some
that?
audio and add it to our we spoke to our listener so and
Brilliant.
so in
Brilliant.
California, our
I
listener in
love
London, our listener in New Jersey. So, anyway, Caroline Hill, it is always a privilege and honor. So much fun. I'm so grateful to you for joining me for this edition of Charting Change in Legal, and congratulations again on
it.
producing yet another successful SAGAP event.
Thank you so much, Ari. I appreciate your support. It's so nice to chat to you.